All right, Finding Polaris friends. We have my friend here, Bryan Hardy. His website is Revitalized Man. Me and Bryan go back a few years. We actually met through I guess I don't even call it not a men's group. It was a kind of a health group through the Raw Bras back when raw food was the rage back in the days, and then they were quitting the raw food thing. And anyway, Bryan I met in Toronto, and he was a health advocate, also someone who went through his journey with health and a surgery at a young age, similar story to mine, not quite the same, but on a similar path. And Bryan was also I guess I would say mentor for me in the health coaching and education space, since he kind of had walked that trail before me, having a career coaching people, and now he's moved. Whereabouts are you moved out to now?
We are in Port Severn,
Port
so
Everett. I always
I
mix
always
it up
just
with Port Carling.
yeah, not too far from Port Carling. I always describe it as like the southern tip of Muskoka, right next to Georgian Bay. So
Mm,
it's a nice spot. It's been treating us well.
beautiful. So Bryan's not far from us, and yeah, I met him a few years ago. We hit it off, and he's been a kind, helpful soul in my health journey, kind of leaving me some breadcrumbs here and there. And it's always fun to chat with you and kind of look up to you as the big younger brother, I guess, in certain ways. So if you want to
Uh,
introduce yourself, do a little intro, maybe talk about your what got you here, I guess.
yeah, well, and first of all, thank you guys for having me on. It's so fun to see your rewilding and outdoor living and indigenous skills and ancestral skills lifestyle on the gram there. So
Thank you.
definitely my inspiration when it comes to that side of things, is I have not done a whole lot of that these past few years. It's been a lot of working and screen time, but good things, good things. So yeah, happy to be here and to connect with y'all. And for me, I guess the long and short of it is that as you said, I only learned to value my health at a young age, the age of 18, because I lost it. And so a ruptured appendix and misdiagnosis and surgery and antibiotics and then, yeast infections and parasite infections and all that stuff that kind of snowballed from that initial event really revealed to me how important health is, how backwards our system has it, how much suffering there is out there, unnecessary suffering, just because we're either ignorant or we are misled or we never were given that kind of education growing up. I certainly wasn't given much education in the way of health and nutrition and how to take care of ourselves so that we don't end up in a crisis situation, right? We don't end up in a hospital or on medication or needing life-saving surgery. And so as grateful as I am for life-saving surgery, I wouldn't be here without it. Um, that model couldn't teach me how to be well. And that quest and that question has really driven the next, I guess, going on 13 years now.
Wow.
Um, and so it's been a wild adventure. I wouldn't change it for the world, even though it's not been easy or smooth in many points of the process. But it has helped me to understand, my own values and that helping people and teaching people and empowering people to live what I call a revitalized life is why I'm here, and the thing that lights me up the most. So, yeah, whether it's nutrition, fitness, spirituality, all the above, those are the things that I love to chat about and happy to dive into here.
Right on. Daria just stepped out. The baby woke up, so she's gone to potty and stuff like that. So I think I'll start off with we share a similarity in, I guess, views of health and better living through technology. And I'd like you to just kind of talk about um, how you use technology in a way that we like to encourage people live their life on a daily basis, where you're bringing nature into your life as much as possible. And that doesn't just stop at, going outside. You find ways to bring, maybe it's not nature, quote unquote, but more on the rhythm or frequency vibration of nature into your, I guess, healing, your working out, just your, I just see some of your awesome posts, like with the working with the red light, and just, I guess, explain to people how you integrate these more natural modalities with not just, going outside, but your work, your working out, helping clients, all that stuff.
Yeah, so I think it really helps to take a like an elemental perspective. Baby. Yeah, to take an elemental perspective and recognize that if we can't get natural exposure to things like sunlight, or we can't get as much sunlight as we would prefer, or contrast therapy through water, cold and hot water, electromagnetic grounding and connection in that way. And so those are all the things that the earth just provides, naturally. They're always there. And yet our modern life, our lifestyles insulate us from those things to a large degree. And so whether it's like I've got a grounded mouse pad on my desk here, I use light devices in the morning to wake up my brain and sort of turn things on if I'm up before the sun has risen, but I want to still get that cortisol effect and that wakefulness effect. Red lights you mentioned, which I find red light technology has really grown in popularity over the years. And it's fantastic because it's something that we would naturally get from sun. It varies throughout the day, of course, but we can get it in a artificial way through a device that allows us to still get a therapeutic dose of that nutrient, as it were, right? Light as a nutrient. And we know that it increases energy, it improves collagen production, it reduces inflammation. It does a lot of good for the body, similar to, lying out and getting full body sun of the full spectrum, of which red is part of that. But we can, sort of hack it per se, or supplement it into our lifestyle, right? So if you're going to be exposed to artificial lighting for 8+ hours a day, at least give yourself 20 minutes of red light, or 20 minutes of, standing outside, or finding ways to sprinkle these things throughout the day, right? So that it's not just this completely disconnected living, but it is a way of adapting and, still bringing in that stimulus so that your body thinks, okay, I'm getting access to, these really healthy inputs. But you don't have to go, out of your way, and you don't have to live, quote unquote, like, off grid in the middle of the woods, a solar powered lifestyle, right? You can still live a very modern life and still enjoy the benefits of city living and modern living. And just be mindful of bringing those elements in, whether it's light, or, your electrical charge, or, even putting a filter on your shower, so you're not, absorbing the chemicals as you do your hot, cold contrast, wake up, bathe, clean yourself up kind of thing. So there's all these little things we can do to augment maybe the baseline infrastructure in most cities or towns where we're going to find ourselves, to make them more harmonious with what our bodies need and want.
Yeah, it's so funny what you just shared was literally Jeff and I's experience. So I was living off grid, had like zero, I didn't have a sauna, I didn't use red light. I was in some ways actually quite against those things. I was very much just, nature is my medicine, nature will provide everything. And I was actually quite turned off. I still kind of am, to be honest, just like the word biohacking and this idea of, putting devices to create, a certain desired impact on our body, because, my perspective is that it's taking away our ability and our own awareness when we're relying on these outside technologies. But then Jeff was kind of the other side that you just shared, where he had, awareness of these technologies, red light, sauna, the biomet, the PMF, the vibration platform, water filtering, and all of that. And then when we met, we kind of created this balance and this bridge in between. So it's definitely part of our story of like how we met. And then creating now a home, a home that just reflects our values, reflects our connection to nature without getting like too pulled in or out of it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think yeah, you do a great living example of it, that Paul Chek calls it bioharmonizing, because he hates the word biohacking.
Mm-hmm.
And if some people get turned off by that term, because sometimes it seems a little, has some extra baggage to it. But
Yeah.
like, you do a great example of, you create a lifestyle, you and your wife, that now you're not working a 9 to 5 job, or you're in a factory or a warehouse or a store or whatever, but now you're still on computers. Well, it's okay, not by choice, obviously. Like, I'm sure you guys would love to just have people pouring in without ever having to touch a computer, but it's not the case. So until that point, it's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna, step outside for 5 minutes, get some fresh air, or, do our morning workout. Or I seen you got that treadmill desk, or the treadmill for under your desk. And then you combine it with the red lights, and then you have devices like the Blue Shield, which maybe we can get into later. But it's because of the circumstance, you're not just going to give up on the optimizing your health or your lifestyle and just, well, I have to do my job, so I'll just throw that all out the window. And it's like, no, you can stack as many different things and implement as much as you can to maybe integrate a more natural lifestyle in an unnatural environment.
Yeah.
So do you have any, like Jeff and I call them non-negotiables? Do you have any that show up in your life, maybe on a day-to-day or just in general, something that's a non-negotiable for you in terms of, maybe it's what you work with your clients or just yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly things that I rely on to make sure that I'm feeling good and as rested as I can be, and have the kind of energy and clarity that I want. So those would be, proper hydration in the morning, usually extra minerals going into that. Sometimes doing, a little mini red light morning stretch, kind of breath work kind of flow. Some form of movement, I would say, is more of a non-negotiable, whether it's just like bouncing up and down for 30 seconds, or it's 20 minutes of yoga, or it's like something a bit more structured. Now that we have the dogs, we've had the dog for just over a year, so that forces a walk outside, which is great. And so, I mean, that's become a non-negotiable. Mind you, it'd be very rare for me to go a morning and not get some kind of walking outside or biking outside, especially when the weather's nice. I usually like to start the day with some sort of outside biking, walking, running, jogging, stretching, whatever it might be, so that I can get hydrated, get the lymph flowing, get the blood flowing, get the sweat flowing, get the sunshine in my eyes and on my skin. Like, and is certainly, if I lived in a place where it was warm and sunny year round, that would be every day, right? Every day, waking up with the sun, waking up outside, basically, and going from there. Aside from that, I don't know if there's much that's non-negotiable. I'm pretty adaptable with my routines and so forth, and I'm constantly kind of tweaking things. Like lately, I've been instead of having a chunk of an hour or two to do all the things and take care of myself and take care of the dog and all those kinds of things, I've been I've been intending to wake up earlier and go immediately into a bit of a work stint and get one important thing out of the way, and then come back and use stretching and workout, use that as a bit of a recharge, a bit of a reward, right? Because someone like myself, I don't have to discipline myself to stretch and work out and take care of the body. That's what I love to do. And so for someone who doesn't love those things, who it is work, it feels heavy for them to get their body moving. That can be a great way to overcome that resistance first thing and just get immediately into it. But personally, I would have more resistance to like a work task, right? And sitting down at the computer and getting stuff done in that regard, or mapping out the day or mapping out the week. And so I'm leaning into my own resistance to strengthen the things that I'm not as naturally good at, and then using the things that I have learned to really enjoy and love that are great for my body, using those as like the the reward or the carrot on the stick, right? So that I want to do all the things that I need to do as a professional and as a coach and as a business owner, and then reward myself with the things that are more like self-care, right? And so that's just where I'm at now, because business growth is a higher priority, and I'm feeling stable and healthy in the other ways, but it's going to be different for everybody.
How do you integrate, let's say nature is a broad term, or maybe some of those aspects that you spoke about with clientele?
Yeah. So the majority of the folks I'm working with are typically in big cities, right? So they're in Toronto, they're in, can be in the US or on the West Coast, but they're usually in a big city. And so that has its own challenges, right? You've got even more pollution, EMF, radiation to deal with, just people and noise in general. And so oftentimes I will have, especially if anyone's dealing with anxiety, which is quite common, right? They're just anxious, they're overwhelmed, they're overthinking, they're also tired because of that. I will essentially recommend them to go to the nearest big tree. I don't care where it is, whether it's in a park, whether you can walk there, whether you have to bike there, whatever it is, go to a big old tree, whatever one calls to you, and sit down and put your back against that tree and just breathe for 5 minutes, right? Shut out everything else, leave the phone at home if you can, and just breathe, right? And let the biofield of that tree envelop you and help regulate your nervous system, which trees and plants are great at doing, right? They're great at helping us to sort of co-regulate, and bring us back into more of that parasympathetic, relax, rest and digest kind of nervous system activity. And I only know that because when I was in university, struggling with health and anxiety and overwhelm, I would retreat to the woods and bring my journal and sometimes a little bit of cannabis, and I would just disconnect. And that's where I found, I felt like I would come back to myself, come back to a sense of balance and calm, and just feel totally invigorated and recharged. And so that's often something that I find myself recommending, which it might sound overly simplistic or like, why would I bother sitting next to a tree? And then when you do it and you recognize, or when clients recognize how revved up they've been without even noticing, their baseline has just become this perpetual stress state. And I find the tree meditation, sitting, breathing is a great awareness exercise to then help them see the contrast of like my daily stress, overwhelm state to like relaxing with the tree, relaxing in the park, and which one feels better, right? And which one feels more like you? Where can you be more creative? Where can you be more tapped into, the things that inspire you or light you up or that speak to a deeper calling within you? For me, that's always going to be, the tree version of me. And so that's something that comes up quite a lot, is helping people to physically go and reconnect in some capacity, and just put themselves in that environment and see what happens.
Yeah, that brings out like so many points for me. We recently did an interview with Mario Garza, and he studies symbology and symbolism, and he's a big proponent of the North Star and how many things kind of just stack in layers of almost the doctrine of signatures, and the trees being one of them, of like a symbol of a pole, representing that pole star or North Star. And yeah, it made me think of that. And then also like the studies where they show people in cities and how they can gauge how many people are residing in a city by how fast they walk. And kind of like you said, that baseline anxiety, and something we see even with our events where, we're in a big enough city. There's 100,000 plus here, and it's still a 2 or 3 day timeline till the residual, almost static field of just like, it might not even be anxiety, it just might be like the buzz of the city like washes off of them. It still takes time for people to just like and just like let it all out, and then just almost be themselves. And that's being in a remote area with, way less pollution, signals, all the stuff that can kind of wind us up. And yeah, we still see that with folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm curious, so, part of being in a city oftentimes results in a lot of domestication. And, you were saying earlier that you're a movement guy and that comes, naturally, easily. That's fun and playful for you. And, with domestication, oftentimes we get people sitting in chairs, sitting, in one posture for many, many, many hours. I'm curious if you have anything to share about, let's call it primal movement patterns, and maybe how you work with that in your life. It's definitely a big part of the way we move. Jeff and I, just day to day, or yeah. So I'm curious what you have to say about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is an area where I could certainly do better. And I've had periods where it's more of a focus, usually because of some kind of injury or imbalance, right, or postural issue, of which I've had many. And then I, come to a new baseline and then get comfortable and then can kind of lose track of it. But for me, the biggest thing is, even if I'm sitting, it's, finding some subtly different ways to do that, right? So I might cross one leg and then cross the other leg and get a bit of a stretch, or then stand up, right? So having the height adjustable desk, stand up, throw the treadmill down, get some walking in. But otherwise, it's like the conscious effort to practice squatting, right, is a big one, and has been a big one. And certainly when I first started all this stuff like 10, 12 years ago, I was tight and could barely squat, and it was painful to even get into that kind of position. And so, yeah, looking for variety, I would say, is what I personally kind of strive for. And then also paying attention to where are the tight spots in the body and where are the weak spots in the body, and how can I, open up the tight spots and then strengthen the weak spots. And so that takes more of like a corrective exercise, self-massage kind of approach. But I'm also not afraid and do love, and especially, having a dog is a great excuse to get down on the ground and wrestle and move and roll and crawl and do all those fun things. So, yeah, I think I've maybe had more time crawling around since we got the puppy. But otherwise, it's just, yeah, how can I make something fun? And I'm a big fan of, like, following along to like YouTube videos for movement, whether it's yoga or it's like animal flow or whatever it might be, right? So popping something like that on that I can just not think about it and just follow along and put my body through a more diverse, range of positions and range of motion, always feels so good.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things when we were living off grid for the year that I was there, was the movement piece. Because what I found was, I had freedom from a job, and we didn't have, there wasn't any martial arts studios or anything like that. Would have been my normal place for movement and release. And then we're also working toward our dream. So what ended up happening is, I'm similar to you. Like, I don't need an excuse to move and want to do all these things, but work and our projects took precedence. So, and then you end up working, the sun's out, it's warm, you end up making hay while the sun shines and doing all your projects. And next thing you know, you're stiff, you've overworked and all this stuff. And it was harder to do yoga, harder to stretch. Like, mind you, we were in 100 square foot bunkie, so it's quite tiny, but all the movement stuff went way, way down because we were so focused on everything else. And actually, the picture of living off grid versus how it actually was, there almost wasn't time for all these other things. We were so consumed with everything else that now, being closer to the city and into a house, it's a major difference. Now we have the room allocated to do that. Now with our little one, it's kind of like the puppy. Like, now, don't need an excuse to hop on the ground and maybe just wiggle around and move joints and stuff. But yeah, that was a huge a huge misnomer people might assume with, oh, I'm gonna go live off grid, and like if you don't have, there's levels of off grid, but if you're not taken care of so much to the point that you're not just working constantly to keep that baseline, you actually get less of all the things that you were looking for, which is like, I just pictured, yoga on the beach, we're just going to be stretching every day, we're running and swimming. Like there was a lot of that stuff, but the movement practice went away huge. And it got to the point where we got a fitness membership and the gym was maybe, I don't know, 2,000 square foot, maybe 1,500 square foot, just a small little gym in this small town. And we'd have to go there like every night just to make sure we were doing our like R&R and not overdoing it.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you mentioned there speaks so powerfully to the role of environment in all this, right? Because if you don't have a space that's dedicated for it, then it's easy to forget about it, right? And where we are now, we have one room, which, is technically a small bedroom, but we've turned it into a studio. So we have yoga mats and our lights and our tread climber thing and all of our stuff's in that one room. And so it's easy enough, as long as I have the thought and I make the time to go in there. And even if I go in there with no plan and just do anything, right, do whatever I feel like doing, it's going to be better than not. But yeah, if someone is living in a place where they have either a very small space, or they don't have access to a facility for that, or they don't have a really keen awareness on, okay, these are the kinds of things that I must do for myself on a daily basis, then like you said, you have projects, you have work, you have other demands on your time and things you want to get done, and so you do those things. So yeah, it's really, really wild to see, having lived in houses and then living in small condos and going to gyms versus having home movement and fitness kind of setups. And even now, like the saving grace for me where we're at, even though we have the one room, some of our neighbors go away for the winter, and so I watch their place, and they have a basement that's in like every kind of gym thing you would ever want. And so for me, that's like the sanctuary. It's like after a long day, I go over there for 30 minutes or an hour, jack the music up, and it's like my time. And I've got everything I need, and it's spacious and it's open, and it's perfect. And it was funny because we were here for two years before that arrangement of taking care of their place, in the winter began. And I didn't realize how much I was missing that. Right, similar to what sounds like for you guys, you didn't realize how much your bodies were missing having a space to go to train and to move and to like you said, take care of the kinks or the tightness after working all day, especially doing physical labor, right, which is going to add up a lot faster on the body.
Yeah, and well, I used to love when you were in city, I would see you in the parks and stuff, and it's like, I think that's a big something to pass on to people too, is like when Bryan wasn't out in the country, I would see him making do with whatever he had. He'd be at the park. I remember I think it was the first time we met, like we ended up going to a park. You started just doing pull-ups and chin-ups, like, all right, we're doing it. Okay, let's hang, let's do some pull-ups, some chin-ups. And then I remember when we first met, after a few months, we ended up in a one-bedroom apartment, small little apartment, and bought like the cheesy puzzle piece mats off Amazon and just set it up so we had like a 6x4 spot to stretch or work out. Had the weights right there, so like there's like a sauna in the corner, vibration platform. We had it set up so that was like our little space, even though there was nothing else in the apartment except a kitchen and our bed. It's like, no, we have this little space, so like you just hop in there, get her done. So people don't need to, you can make it work regardless of what your situation is, depending on, how bad you want it. Of course, that's a key factor. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's certainly easy to not want it and to not think about it, right? If you're not careful in sort of our culture at large, right? That's more common than not. right? Is people just being very entirely disconnected from their bodies and living in their heads and going here and going there and, chasing all the things and making the money and checking the boxes and, doing all those things. And then wondering why when they're like, 40 or 50 or even younger, they're in pain all the time, or they can't do the things they used to do, or they want to play a sport with their kids and they're like, they can't bend down or they can't throw a ball, like all these very basic things. So yeah, it's easy to slip into a pattern of not tending to those things when you're
and like the concept of like working in that Paul Chek speaks about of, like the concept of qigong or tai chi, that you're going to use this energy, but actually it's going to be like a generator or alternator with a car. Is you need to give energy so it can be amplified and returned back. And I've been guilty of that, and I'm sure you see it with clients, is what they really need is that walk to the tree after work, or just a walk down the street, just like some movement. But then you're just so like zonked or out of it, you're just like, oh, you get on the couch, you're like, this is what I need to just not move or whatever. I just need to like put a show on, clear my head, not think. And I get it, and there's always a time for that, but also not realizing, like, going to spend a little bit of energy, you might go for a walk and realize, oh, like I'm gonna do 10 pull-ups or something, and you do like a 20-minute workout and you go back home, you actually feel 1,000 times better just because you stoke that fire a bit. You got the charge going, charge your battery up, when really, if you like, what your body needed was that movement, or like the clear-headed walk with no headphones. It needed the mental time, or you needed to see a tree and some birds and some grass. But we think like, oh, I'm so exhausted. It's so counterintuitive, like, oh, I'm white, like I can't, I'm done for the day. I work so hard, and like I go home and just rest. That's why my body needs rest. And then we don't realize, like, oh, actually what it needs is just like a little subtle something that just stimulates it enough to like refresh it.
Yeah.
One of my like movement teachers that I studied under actually quite some time ago was Katie Bowman, which you're probably familiar with her work. And I love her philosophy of like nutritious movement. And she just says, move as much as you can, move in as many like shapes, with as many loads as you can. And of course she has a natural movement kind of background, primal movement stuff. But I really loved her philosophy of just like integrating movement in all aspects of your life. Anyways, what you said just made me think of her. But I love her work. And she actually, like, speaking of movement, even the whole barefoot world, like she helps people transition from, their thick, like casted shoes essentially to barefoot, because, what happens when people start going barefoot, or people come to our programs, people come with, this, maybe 10 years of conditioning their bodies in a certain way. And then they feel like it hurts to go barefoot. Or some participants can't take their shoes off. Or, now we don't have chairs. So like you said earlier with the squatting, now we have participants who are facing this, like, it's quite intense when someone can't come down.
Cross applesauce.
Yeah, or just go down, bend your knees. It's kind of, a squat down and then a squat to be able to come up. And, we take away all these furnitures or fixings, and then people are faced with like really harsh realities. But we try as much as we can in programs to help people integrate. But oftentimes it's, one step at a time. They're very slow transitions to heal from those patterns of domestication and how our bodies hold that.
I think that'd be a great segue to hear your thoughts and experience with being in like a metro area and doing the barefoot, because like my observations of you, of like, you did so much rewilding and biohacking and all this stuff, and it's like you did it right in the heart of a city, so there was no excuse. Like, I would see you out there barefoot, like you're doing stuff, you get shirtless in the park, it's like you made it happen. where someone could be like, oh, like I'm in the shitty, there's no point, or it's too hard. And yeah, your experience with maybe going barefoot.
Yeah, it took a while, and I had flat feet up until I was like, I don't know, 20-ish, something like that. When I first clued in to the whole idea of like barefoot running and barefoot, living and strengthening the foot and building an arch naturally, all these things which seem really obvious now, at least to many of us in this world, but still to most are, not obvious. They think, oh, my feet are just flat. I wear orthotics. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And that's what I did for many years. And I had, ankle pain, knee pain, back pain, all kinds of pain. And so transitioning to barefoot, I, like most people, did it too fast at first and got gung-ho and tried sprinting barefoot on an indoor track at university.
Oh God.
My calves and ankles and like Achilles were sore for like a week
Oh.
after that. So I learned, and then after I got like, my first pair of like barefoot shoes and would wear those whenever I could. And, that was a gradual process. And then when I worked at Whole Foods in Toronto, I got some barefoot shoes. And looking back now, I should have put an extra layer of foam in the shoe. Because I'm like banging my heel on concrete, for like 8 hours a day. And so that definitely caused some pain. But not enough to where it was like debilitating. Because I felt better with, the wider toe spread and just not wearing these like really tight and constrictive shoes, because I was already, I don't know, 3-4 years into that kind of thing. But still needing to adjust for an unnatural environment, right? I can't walk the way I would on grass on concrete. Or I can, but I'm going to pay for it later. So yeah, and then I mean, even to this day, anytime if I'm on sand, if I'm on a dirt trail, if I'm on grass, wherever it is, if it's if it's not minus really really cold, or there's garbage or glass or something, at the earliest opportunity, I want to take the shoes off, right? And you guys are probably the same. It's like you almost become not allergic to shoes, but and you have the option, you would much rather not have them in most cases. And I see that naturally rewiring people when they understand how much better they tend to feel or can feel being in contact, right? And getting the benefits of earthing and the freedom of the foot. But yeah, I mean, I embraced quite early on, I would say, being the weird person who's walking around shirtless and barefoot. And at first I was very, self-conscious and kind of nervous and like, what are people going to think? And then I started to realize, well, first of all, who cares what they think? I don't have to deal with those people or their opinions. But then I made it a game where I would get a kick off of the kinds of funny thoughts I imagined people having about the things I would do in public. And it's a great way to just, stretch yourself and do what you truly want to do, which for me might have been, like shirtless, barefoot yoga in a park or something. And, I would laugh. I would tell myself stories about, the people walking by and what they're thinking and how they're actually secretly wanting to join in, and how, that looks so that like, that person's so free. They look so free. I just want to do that. And so there's always fun ways to kind of flip it around and embrace the process. But yeah, a lot of this health stuff, it's become much more common these days, but a lot of it does, in a sense, invite you to be the odd one out, right? And to swim against the stream. And once you get comfortable doing that, it's great. Then you become a leader, right? You become, even without even trying, you become an influence on those around you by planting seeds in their minds of, oh, I wonder why they're doing that. I see them all the time, never wearing shoes. Like, that's kind of strange. But for me, it's almost like being an evangelist of a healthy lifestyle, planting seeds in people's minds that maybe one day will sprout, maybe they won't. But either way, we're going to have a good time while we do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to maybe talk if you had any other questions. I don't know.
I had one about, you mentioned earlier about supplementation, and where do I want to start? I guess like Jeff and I have, we take supplements. So let's talk about like Shilajit, or we could name a few like Shilajit, spirulina. There's Bioptimizers, their products, Organifi, another great company. That was another one for me when I first met Jeff, was like, but I can get everything through my food. I don't need to buy these fancy supplements. And you know, part of the story is that I was actually very, like, I was unhealthy. I was dealing with inflammation, and then I was at a nutrient deficit for sure. My body was very stressed when I met him. And yet I was like, I wasn't very open to the supplementation. And then I'll never forget the first time I had Shilajit for like 3 days and how amazing my body felt. And anyways, I'm much more open now, finding good quality supplements to just enhance already a baseline of a very strong diet. You know, high quality foods, whole foods, good fats, good proteins, all that, good water, but adding these, you know, supplements. And I would say I'm still sometimes on that line where there's if the supplement is not like completely derived from something natural, from nature, I'm still a little bit hesitant. And like, I guess an example of that could be
maybe like the magnesium, or yeah, something like that, where it's super synthesized by the time you get it. With the caveat too that I was never the Costco vitamin person. So like she came to it with like, hey, this is what, you know, the millionaires are doing right now too. So like it's a lot easier to, I guess, pill to swallow for a play on words.
Yeah, so I guess I'm curious to hear like your perspective on supplementation. Where, you know, do you have a boundary, or your perspective on like a more like a supplement that comes just like right from the earth? For example, of like, let's use magnesium as the example, where it's a little bit more tinkered or played around with, or yeah, anything like that.
Yeah, great question. Great question. For me, and I heard it put, I forget who said it, but recently they encapsulated it really well. Because I've had the conversation with people for years.
I like the encapsulation. Like we're just running on like tons of
supplement puns. Yeah. Because I've had the conversations for years with people who I might tell them what I'm taking or doing for a protocol, or have done in the past for a protocol if they're dealing with something that I'm advising them on. And they're like overwhelmed and just like, why so many things? That's crazy. And so I would have that conversation of, okay, well, we have to understand our food is coming from soil that's not necessarily the most enriched. And even when we're getting organic food, it's not picked fresh, like right then at the peak of ripeness. And so even if we're getting the best stuff possible through stores and etc., there's still not going to be, you know, optimal nutrition available in the food. But it was better simplified to one might be able to thrive, and you can still live a great life, right? Eating really good whole foods and like being mostly free from most diseases, I would say is still doable, particularly if you're over in like Europe and Italy and those places where the food supply is a lot more pristine and protected, and fresher. Because obviously freshness has a huge role, right? Ripeness and freshness are like massively overlooked by most people. But it was put like, in a world, if a world existed where we got all of our toxins from nature, then it would make sense we could also get all of our nutrients from nature, because they would kind of, you know, match each other in intensity. Because the more toxic stuff we're exposed to, or the more stressful environments we're exposed to, the more nutrition the body needs to deal with that stress. Wow. Right? Things like magnesium and vitamin C are really good examples of this, because the more stressed you are and the more compromised your system is, the more vitamin C and magnesium it will actually absorb and utilize, rather than just, you know, flush out. And if anyone's ever done a flushing vitamin C protocol where you take like 2,000 milligrams every 15 minutes or so until you get basically diarrhea. And it's because once you hit bowel tolerance, it's your body saying, okay, I can't do anything with this, right? It's too much. I can't deal with all this vitamin C. And some people can take like 15 or 20 grams of vitamin C before they hit that level, right? So their body's utilizing a whole lot. This would be like, I don't know, 100 or 200,000% of the daily recommended value, right? Like insane amounts, seemingly insane amounts. But because we live in such, many of us live in such unnatural, chronically stressed, depleted kind of bodies and environments, our bodies actually need those things, whether it's minerals, vitamins, antioxidants, etc., to counteract, the free radicals, the heavy metals, the EMF, EMF stress, the mental emotional stress, the lack of sleep, like all of these things add up on our stress load. And then certain nutrients will be like a direct mitigation of the harmful effects, showing up. So I'm very much of that opinion that to achieve optimal wellness, we need to be smart and strategic with our supplementation, and obviously and source the highest quality, most bioavailable forms of things. And just from the things that you listed off of some of the dailies that you're taking, clearly you guys have done that, right? Because all of those things, Shilajit, spirulina, those would be, in my eyes, like some of the top things we can take that cover a lot of bases, and really do the body a lot of good to have that stuff on a regular basis. Very medicinal, those compounds. So for me, yeah, I mean, I definitely take more than the average person. I don't take as much day to day unless I'm doing something specific. So when I was very, very unwell and was like doing this whole gut overhaul and rebuilding protocol, I was taking, I don't know, 20 plus, things a day, different capsules and so forth. Now I've whittled that down to a bit more of like a foundational, like 6 to 8 things maybe, and it'll change day to day. And I'm not as obsessive about always having to take things. And I like taking breaks. I like going away for a weekend and just bringing like some magnesium, right? And having everything else just stay at home and kind of resetting the body's tolerance, you might say, or just giving it a chance to kind of flush the system and then come back and reconnect to it. So yeah, I am definitely a believer in the power of smart supplementation. And I use it and I recommend it. And I love, part of me really geeks out when I get to build custom protocols for people. And, when they tell me that like I have more energy or I felt better than I have in like so long, that for me is like, okay, this is amazing. That's the aha moment I want them to have so that they can see the power of nutrition. And that they can really buy in and understand how important this side of things can be.
Yeah, I think that was a beautiful concept. Yeah, because I love the phrase, and I'd say I probably live by it. Yes, no, maybe. So that's a great addition to that concept of, yeah, if it was natural stresses and toxins, and then what nature would put there would work great. But it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you need an EDTA chelation if you have nickel poisoning, or so that's such a great point and way of thinking of things, of like, yeah, maybe you need like an ascorbic acid rather than food vitamin C, because maybe you just need to hit it hard and then like reset the switch on your body, like you said, like hit bowel tolerance, or with magnesium, or there's so many substances like niacin. Like we could just go through the vitamin mineral stack and just synthetic versus food based, or and more stuff's always coming down with stuff like that. Maybe you could take a minute and mention, I know you're big with the nootropics. I just got a package from Nootopia of a bunch of sample stuff that they're prototyping, and I'm dabbled less in the world of nootropics. Like I probably have in ways of like coffee and different substances I've used, but I guess nootropics for folks is substances that are cognitively enhancing, and kind of your take on how you use those, because I know I've seen that you dabble around with them.
Yeah, and those are more so the kind of things that I'm not taking every day. Same thing, and I mean, I'm very sensitive to all kinds of stimulants, so I can get away with taking a little bit and get a large effect from it. But it also means I need to make sure I don't acclimatize myself to that effect, because then I'll become hooked on it and want more and more of that stimulation. But nootropics can be amazing. And, there's natural ones, there's synthetic ones. I'm definitely a fan of, whether it's like different herbs like bacopa can be really helpful for a lot of people, ashwagandha, these kind of things that have like an Ayurvedic Indian medicine background or Chinese medicine background, that can help the body deal with stress and protect and enhance cognitive function. I'm a big fan of those. And some of those are like food, right? Like if you can source lion's mane mushrooms from a market near you, or grow them or forage them, then that's your meal, right? You can just eat them like any other mushroom, and they're going to have this really cool, neurogenic kind of stimulating effect. So I'm a big fan of, I would say most common, I'm more so into for daily use, like herbs and mushrooms in the nootropic category. And then when I really need some support, I'll have something either from Nutopia or from, I like the Qualia formulas. There's been a whole whack of things I've tried over the years, really. Certain amino acids can also have sort of just that brain enhancing effect. And so I like to kind of tinker with them and find that sweet spot where you're not so stimulated and almost like feeling like speedy, because that can certainly happen if you take, certain substances. But where you get that a slight elevation in energy, a slight boost in cognitive function, but also a kind of a clarity that comes with it. And so, yeah, like I'm just trying to think as of recent what that's been.
I like the caveat that you added that, and what resonates with me is like your herbs, your mushrooms are going to be the more gentle. And if it comes to a chemical or maybe a more like 10-to-1, going with like a traditional, or not traditional, I guess a newer version nootropic, where maybe it's got a bunch of vitamins and maybe it's got the same herbs and stuff in it, but it's just got like bigger punch, and it maybe has a couple little synthetic things in there to really kick you off and not becoming developing abusive relationship to it. And I think that's so important for people to know.
Yeah. And I've also seen people who have struggled with substance addiction of various sorts, whether cannabis, kratom, nicotine, less so. Alcohol can be part of that as well. And they go to nootropics as like a Band-Aid, right?
Yeah,
So
it's like the
without,
joke of like alcohol addicts, and they just pick up like a nootropic, or like, I used to drink all the time. Now it's like CrossFit, and it's just like abuse it to the nth degree and just find a different substance or thing to abuse.
yeah, right. And so I think it comes down to really knowing ourselves, and a resource that I can share, that I found really, really useful for myself, for clients, family, friends, etc., is a website called Braver Man Test. Braver Man Test. And it's a questionnaire, and it's quite in depth. So, give yourself 15, 20 minutes to go through it. But it's basically a questionnaire that links behaviors and tendencies to neurotransmitters, right? So if you're very dominant in these kinds of neurotransmitters, you're likely to have these kinds of behaviors or tendencies. And so you do this whole questionnaire, and it spits out your results, and it will help you understand from a qualitative perspective, am I more dopamine driven, right? Or am I more of a serotonin person? Or am I more of an acetylcholine individual? And then from there, it will recommend both natural and, well, it's pretty heavy on the natural, but, herbs, amino acids, etc., that are like the building blocks of those neurotransmitters, so that you can experiment and tinker and see what things make you feel the best, right? Because there's so many formulas out there, and many of them will be kind of like dopamine and choline focused, right? Which are great if that's kind of your dominant tendency, or where you might be deficient. But if that's not you, then it might not do much for you, or it might make you feel kind of weird, right? Or kind of like, I just feel kind of off or irritated almost. Which I've certainly had, taking like high doses of dopamine supports and dopamine rebuilders and like tyrosine and caffeine and all these things, taking too much, and I'll get like a headache and I'll just feel like, oh, like uncomfortable in my own skin. And that's where I know, okay, I've taken too much. Let me have some 5-HTP. Let me have some serotonin support and like rebalance this whole thing. But that's for a resource for people to go and understand, okay, what are, first of all, the neurotransmitters we're even targeting with something like a nootropic? And then where am I on the spectrum? And then what are like the 1 or 2 or 3 things I can take that have a really great safety profile, that are well studied, whether they're herbs, amino acids, or whatever they might be. But that there's very little risk of any kind to take things like that and just see how it affects me, right? It's funny because every time I've tried like a new nootropic, the first time, I guess similar to most drugs too, the first time typically is like the strongest, right? So I can remember the first time I took Alpha Brain in university, I did like 4 hours of calculus study. And I was not that into calculus. Like I enjoyed math enough, but I was not like, a keener, like just dying to get into my homework. And I sat there for 4 hours and like got through all the practice problems and was like quite amazed. And then the next time I took something called Noopept, which is a really, really potent substance, but I took that, went down to the gym in the basement of where I lived and had an insane workout. Like the contraction force and the mind muscle connection was just so heightened that I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is really cool. And so they can have those kind of like superhuman-esque effects. But yeah, just being aware that, there's always a trade-off, right? It's like the whole idea, there's no biological free lunch, right? So if you're going to feel really, really good and really, really, jacked up today, you're probably not going to feel, normal tomorrow. You might feel a little bit below baseline and need to take it easier, or need to replenish those vitamins, minerals, nutrients that you've burned through at an accelerated rate because you were hitting the gas on certain pathways.
Nice. I love that resource. Thank you.
Mhm.
I want to pick your brain. You're a affiliate for the Blue Shield. And for folks who don't know, Dariya and I have a Blue Shield. I'm a bit of I guess people would say, wacky out there health person, and I think Bryan can echo the same. Like, I like cutting edge stuff and I like esoteric stuff, but one of the biggest things I think people are missing in the rewilding movement, if you're not out in the countryside or like super close to nature, or maybe sitting on 100 acres, is bringing some type of device that will either recreate, or I don't even know the words. I think we probably both lack the intellectual communication to actually say what they do effectively on a scientific level, but bringing something that resonates with the frequency or vibration of the natural world. And I've had devices before the Blue Shield. I have one that's called a Rest Shield, and it's a crystal pyramid device made by a quite out there character. And yeah, I just love when I first heard of the Blue Shield. I instantly resonated with me. So if people don't understand, essentially these are devices. They can go like under 0 point, scalar, Schumann resonance, so many, I guess, different names for energetics or ether energy that our world has on a baseline kind of all around us all the time that we don't necessarily feel or notice. But this device, the Blue Shield in particular, creates different frequencies to break up the constricting kind of all the cell phones, the Wi-Fi, the electrical in our house, which would be like a non-native EMF, like you name it. You got EMFs, I'm a mechanic. I can tell you all the crazy EMFs that just come from a car. So that's electromagnetic fields for people not too sure. They could be magnetic, could be electromagnetic. There's so many different things, satellites or GPS, towers, radio waves, like so many different waves around us all the time. And these are just different types of light forms. So these devices almost provide a counter frequency that's closer to nature. And it'd be akin to people saying, it's just different when I'm outside in the bush. It just feels different because it is different. You're not bombarded by all these frequencies that science is now showing us are harmful in different levels and different ways to everybody in a different manner. So not everyone might feel it, not everyone might get affected the same way, but yeah, just if you want to riff or speak about these devices, I think it's such an important piece, and I'm gonna go out there and say in the next 20 years, that's gonna move to the forefront for sure. Because these devices, when you and I started, were probably like only the really wealthy and really out there people were going for it, and now it's becoming more mainstream. So yeah, if you just want to riff on that or talk about it, or you might know more about the Blue Shield as your affiliate, and I'm just, grasping at straws.
Yeah, I think you're doing a fairly good job though, and you have a lot of the right sort of buzzwords and concepts. So, yeah, I think about it as, we live in a very chaotic electromagnetic soup, and our bodies are electromagnetic in their makeup. And light and electromagnetism are above chemistry in terms of how our bodies actually operate. And we're seeing more and more of that in like the new science and quantum biology and these kind of things. But without getting, lost in that, well, first a story. So I've seen this multiple times now, where family members or clients who are typically living in a suburban place surrounded by cell towers, or in like downtown Toronto kind of environment, also surrounded by cell towers. But one person in particular, a friend of ours, who had moved into his brand new custom home, right? Beautiful, probably multi-million-dollar custom home. And he couldn't sleep in this house. He would just lie there awake all night and feel like stimulated. And he doesn't even drink coffee or tea or anything. And he's just like, I can't sleep in my house. And this was going on for a long time. He would go to his cottage, sleep like a baby. He'd go traveling, sleep like a baby. Go spend time with a friend, sleep fantastic. And he had tried doing energy clearing, smudging. He had someone who worked with if there's ghosts in there that are keeping, the energy messed up, to clear that stuff out. He tried all these things, putting a crystal grid. He had done a lot of stuff. None of it really had an effect. And myself and my partner Katya were already at this point 2 or 3 years into using Blue Shields and recommending those kind of devices for our clients, to help with that electromagnetic harmonization piece, right? And my partner just happens to be able to communicate with the body in a very kind of matter-of-fact, almost too matter-of-fact way. It took me a while to recognize that some people just have this ability to speak to the consciousness that is the body and get direct insight from that level of things. Other people use muscle testing or dowsing to get that same kind of, nervous system or body consciousness insight into what that body needs to come back to balance. Either way, long story short, his body informed Katya that it was basically the main electrical panel in that house that was putting off such a dirty electricity field that it was frying his nervous system. And that's why he couldn't sleep. And he's quite open, this friend of ours. And so we told him what and he was desperate. This was more than a year of trying to sleep in this brand new house. So he was open and ready to find a solution. So he went and got himself, at that point, it was the C1, I believe, which was their highest end device at that point in time. And he got one and he plugged it in and he slept the first night, and him and his wife the next day both felt hungover. Wow. Which was really interesting because neither of them was drinking or doing any kind of drugs. And this is what I've seen time and time again, and why the Blue Shield devices really piqued my interest. because when the body's in that chaotic stress state, it can't detoxify and it can't rest and recover and regenerate in the way that it typically would every single night when we go down for sleep. And so you get this backlog of toxicity and stress that can't be processed. And then when you're back into a more harmonized environment, because the device is broadcasting a field that our bodies can really understand and entrain to, then it allows it to get back into that rest and digest and recover. And then people they'll feel hungover, they'll feel like flu-like symptoms for a few days or a week even. They might have to sleep a lot for a few days, just like 10 hours a night for a few days, and just kind of reboot their system. And then after that, typically they feel more like themselves. And so I've seen this happen multiple times, from people who worked on computers doing video editing, who couldn't be on a computer for more than like 20 minutes before getting a headache and having to step away. And then they got a blue shield and they can go like an hour, 2 hours plus after. And similar for myself, when I worked downtown Toronto, I was in, and it's funny to think that we were in a wellness center and the EMF was off the charts. And I brought a meter in to check it. And it's like, people are coming here to heal and to relax and to recover. And they're literally inside like a microwave. And no one knows, no one's even paying attention. And so I would find I would have to take regular breaks and get outside of that building and walk around and go to the park, just to not either get a headache or like feel sleepy at my desk. So yeah, it was understanding, okay, I can get the physics of it, and I can get that there's all these signals, and that, our bodies do better in a more harmonious, more Schumann-like frequency, which tends to be lower, like 7.83 hertz is the Schumann resonance, technically, although that's been changing and spiking for years now.
Yeah, for people who don't know, Schumann resonance is just a name for the I'm not even sure if it's electromagnetic or just electrical in nature, the frequency of the earth itself.
Yeah, I think you could describe it as an electromagnetic pulse, right? That's always being emitted, and it changes. It's dynamic, especially these days as we're like moving through this ascending kind of timeline towards, what some would call a new earth, which is really exciting and kind of unprecedented, and like, how's this going to happen? Yeah, so the Blue Shield, I've just seen time and time again that they help people sleep better, be around technology better, and not be fatigued or brain fogged or, unable to feel rested and focused. And so, yeah, it's to have something that you can count on as like your insurance against this otherwise invisible, force that's out there that's causing all kinds of, at a cellular level, all kinds of dissonance and chaos for our systems, as you said, is essential for thriving. And I think as we get more and more into 5G and 6G and beyond, whatever else is coming after, that it will be seen as an essential, in something that, ideally, communities could just put like a giant one in the center of each little town, and we'd all be taken care of. Like, it wouldn't be hard technically to do.
Yeah, I remember living in an apartment building, and I had the Blue Shield and I had my rest shield, and the Blue Shield goes about, I think it's 90 meters it goes out. And I just remember there was a dental office underneath us, and just like, you guys are getting this for free. Like, you better appreciate it, because everyone around us, your life's gonna be better. You just won't know it. Like, no more fighting with your spouses. It's like it's all gonna get better.
Yeah, and it is wild to see how, being in a more harmonious field, however that's generated through a blue shield or otherwise, will tend to bring about more harmony in living beings, right? Plants grow better. Animals tend to like them and gravitate towards them, if there's some sort of like, infrared or PEMF device around. The animals tend to pick up on that pretty quickly. And yeah, certainly when we're sleeping better and resting better and feeling less chaotic, we can relate more harmoniously and more consciously and constructively. So yeah, it really does fit in nicely and kind of underlie all the other things that we do, from moving to eating to supplementing to spiritual practices and to time in nature and to whatever it is we're doing. It's that that unseen level that is also important. And
Yeah, the big
needs to be
selling
addressed.
point for me was the stories Brandon Amalani would speak about where they would try it on factory farmed laying hens and factory farmed cows, where he said the farmers would often have, and these are CAFO operations, factory farmed, having GMO grain feed, and they would have something, you know, we're talking on a level maybe like 10,000 laying hens in one operation, and seeing something like 100 or 1,000 die a month, and without any change except adding the blue shield, and the presupposition being that animals don't have a what's it called, the I'm blanking on the words.
Like a placebo effect? Like
Yes,
there's no.
placebo effect. Thank you.
Mhm.
That they were having like 1 or 2 deaths of these hens in this factory farming situation, with the only change being the blue shield. So that for me was like, wow, it was just like, okay. And especially to, you know, humans is one thing, but now when you can hit all life forms and have that drastic of an effect on, you know, what many of us in, like, you know, Bryan and I's background of the health world, that's like the evil incarnate, you know, like that's like the devil's playground, those CAFO operations, and just like the least beautiful godly thing you could imagine, you know, 10,000 hens stuffed into a big dark room being force fed GMO grains. And that for me was like a big wow, like, okay, this is, they went above and beyond to showcase the possibilities of this technology and brought, you know, the proof's in the pudding, and they brought it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the exact kind of research that Katya will always share with clients who are unfamiliar or who don't really understand it, but know they're not feeling great. She'll always recommend that they read some of that to see that there's a measurable and quantifiable benefit to creatures that have no awareness of what's going on. Because certainly if you tell a certain number of humans, okay, this device is going to make you feel better and healthier, it will, just because they believe it's going to. But yeah, you get to bypass that when you're doing animal research. So yeah, they're fantastic devices. I really appreciate the company. Really great products. And yeah, we've had them for 4 years now and have got different ones over the years. And I don't foresee a future where we don't have them either in our pockets or plugged into to our home.
Love it. You have more questions? I guess tell us what you do for folks, how you can help them, where they can find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so you can find me at revitalizedman.com. That's the website. Also on Instagram at Bryan Hardy. It's BRYANHARDY 7, the number 7, on Instagram, and easy to reach in those platforms and on those mediums. And typically I'm working with guys that are maybe early 30s, but even more so like mid 30s upwards, who are very career driven, are typically quite family driven as well, whether they have children or they want to have children, and they're just not feeling like themselves. They might have accumulated 15, 20, 30 pounds of extra body fat. They're not training. They're feeling depleted. They're feeling flat, and they know that there's more from their bodies, from their minds, from their lives, but they're also don't have the time or necessarily the interest to go and research this all on their own and start experimenting and figuring things out. And so that's where I come in to really simplify the process and help condense decades of experience and research into months and weeks for them, so that they can get directly to, okay, what are the most effective things that I need to be looking at and I need to be aware of from these foundational points of movement, stress management, nutrition, supplementation, spiritual practice, all those different things, so that they can have the energy and have the vitality and have the endurance to show up in business and show up with their family, with their partner, right? To do the things that they enjoy doing, right? Whether it's playing a sport or it's going canoeing or it's playing golf or whatever that might be, or playing with their grandkids, right? Being able to be mobile enough to get down on the ground and move around and have energy and not be in pain. So these are all the kinds of things that I help guys overcome in a very lifestyle based approach, right? So it's about sustainable solutions that they can do forever, not some quick fix of, 30-day, crash course of fitness and nutrition, but it's about making the small changes week by week by week by week, stacking those changes up and addressing all the areas that give us the most leverage to burn fat more effectively, feel better, optimize hormones, optimize our sex life, our mental function, our drive, and feel like the men we were created to be, which I believe we were designed to thrive. And we're here to live that vital lifestyle. So to guide others in that process is a great passion and a great honor for me. And yeah, it's what I love to do. It's what I do all the time. And if anyone's interested, I've got plenty of free resources as well to share, as well as I'm always open to hop on a call or take a message and just hear where you're at, what you're working with, what your goals are, what your challenges are, and see if I can help.
Awesome. Yeah, Brian's a real deal. He's helped me in countless ways, connections, just bouncing business advice, where I've been stuck before. And yeah, he's been a great connection and friend through the years. So I hope you guys check him out. Thanks so much, Brian, for coming on with us, and look forward to doing it again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Hmm.